Ash, your mic, Ash.
You have not turned on your mic.
Your mic is off, Ash. Your mic is off in Google Meet. Your mic, your microphone, not the speaker. The red colored dot.
Oh, no, sorry.
Yeah.
Wait, okay. Okay, so good evening to everyone. Today my friend and I, NURLIN SHAHIRAH, will be presenting on new historicism. So the first one we are going to talk about is the history of new historicism. So it was first developed in the 1980s, primarily through the work of the critic and the University of California Berkeley English, which is an English professor named Stephen Greenblatt. So the term new historicism was coined by Greenblatt when he collected a bunch of essays, and then out of a kind of desperation to get the introduction done, he wrote that essays represented something called a new historicism. So next, what is new historicism? So new historicism is actually a literary theory based on the idea that literature should be studied and interpreted within the context of both the history of the author and the history of the critic. New historicism also seeks to reconnect a work with the time period in which it was produced and identify it with the cultural and political movement of the time, which means a historicist, which is they will look at a work in the past, like a text, and then they will connect it to the world, today's world. So new historicism also assumes that every work is a product of the historic moment that created it. So next is new historicism emphasizes the cultural context in which the text is produced. Instead of focusing on the structure, they focus instead of focusing on the formal structure, they focus on the cultural context of the text, in whether it's in the past or now. So the current literary criticism is affected by the beliefs of our time in the same way that literature reflects and is reflected by its own historical context. So the new historicism acknowledges and embraces the idea that as times change, so will our understanding of a great literature. So in short, it says that the old historicism has its own definition and meaning, while the new historicism has also its own assumptions and statements about it, which produce a great literature. So now I'm going to share with all of you the differences between old historicism and new historicism. So historicism, the history is knowable and stable. It exists and it has presence. Meanwhile, for new historicism, history is considered as textual. So history is a literature. It is not a fact, but it is a fiction. Whether it's book or any poem or anything else. So history and literature are interconnected in New Historicism, and in New Historicism also, um, a historicist sees the history in literature, but literature can also create the history. Next one, for all historicism, they put history first and then they put literature. But as for new historicism, literature is intertextual. So all cultural activities are potential texts to be read, and all texts combine to create a web of relationships and ideas. As for all historicism, there is no such thing as an objective view of history. Meanwhile, new historicism is considered as subjective. It says knowledge is power. It shows how the knowledge is created and who has the rights to make definition of a reality on everyone else. So it means new historicism is something that is subjective. Alright, so the next one, it's about new historicists. So to the new historicists, literature is the end product of a particular cultural moment. They will look into the literature alongside with other cultural products of other texts to illustrate how the concepts, attitudes, and ideologies across a broader cultural spectrum. So it means like they compare another text to another text to see how it differentiate between like their concepts or maybe their attitudes or the ideologies. And the next one is new historicist also acknowledges that their own criticism contains biases that derive from their historical position and ideology. It means some of their criticism that they give is opposite from what is written in the text that they have analyzed as a new historicist. And lastly, new historicist also compares two artistic texts as means to understand both cultural and intellectual history. So a simple example for new historicism is the Shakespeare's Merchants of Venice. So in this, it says that one always comes with the questions of whether the play shows Shakespeare to be anti-Semitic. To the new history was written. So in other words, cultural history can be revealed by studying the work, especially when the new historicist says, but by studying the use and dispersion of power and the marginalization, it is also shows that the study of the history reveals more about the text, and studying of the text reveals more about history analysis. So it's like this: we want to know about the history, we read the text, and we want to know more about the text is related also to the history.
Okay, so for our analysis, we chose Disney's version of Cinderella, which Cinderella tells the story of a young girl's misfortune after her parents' death. Suffering from mistreatment from her stepfamily, she keeps calm and continues to move on. When an invitation for a ball was sent to her household, she was not permitted to go. So without the permission to go, she sat by the garden in tattered dress until a fairy godmother came and grants her wishes. With a new dress and glass slippers, she attracts the prince's attention and left in a hurry by midnight. Left with only a glass slipper, the prince ventured to find her. By the time he arrived at her house, her stepsisters tried the shoes, but it did not fit them. But when Cinderella steps in and tried it, the shoe fits her perfectly. So finally, they married each other and lived happily ever after. Next. Okay, so this short story is based on Charles Perrault's version of Cinderella in 1697 and Grimm's brothers' version in 1812. Next is it has the cultural transformation, which in 1950 Cinderella was symbolized not just as a cosmetic transformation but also a cultural one. The entire movie can be seen as an example of post-war consumerism, and as even in America, although clothing was never formally rationed the way food and fuel were, the transformation was welcomed as a return to luxury and elegance, as if the World War II was never happened. Next was aimed for the younger generation, which can be seen the physical mutilation scene of the Grimm brothers fairy tale was purposely taken out. This is because the years after the war produced a rise in childbirth, which then was called as the baby boom generation. In 1950, there were around 24 million young children in America. Next is a woman's image in the society's eyes. The image that prescribed to the notion of handsome, wealthy prince. Throughout this film, Cinderella never thought of running away from her evil stepfamily, but instead she remained as a submissive servant to her every order with a polite gesture and a smile, never getting angry in front of her stepfamily or the is a woman's place after the war. Upon getting married, the women were expected to stay at home and perform household chores instead of having to work. This can be seen in the movie as Cinderella was what the duties are in the household and what their purpose of life is. It is also shown when the female mice who worked on Cinderella's dress for the ball visually stated that only women are the ones who should only perform household chores. The next one is monarchy system in the film, which there was no mention. As you can see, the prince, father, the king, was the only ruling figure, making it clear that there is no need for a queen in order to rule the kingdom. Not only did the king not have a queen, but he only wanted his son, the prince, to find a bride so that he will be a grandfather. The king was not looking for his son to fall in love, but so that his family line could continue. Next page, please. The last one is the need to have a happy ending. The question is, why is there still a need for a happy ending, since this story started out as a not very happy story. Cinderella was mentally and emotionally abused from a young age. So actually we can see in the history where fairy tales were created when people needed something to get them through their days. Back then the average lifestyle was not very happy and cheerful, but full of work due to the post-war conditions. So they started to tell stories of people overcoming their dreadful lives, and these fairy tales became stories to get children's minds off their terrible future, and to have hope that one day they might have a happy ending. This happy ending can also be looked at in the light of what it teaches young girls. It shows us gender stereotype and taught the girls that in order for them to achieve a happy ending, they must marry. We can see from the aspect of Cinderella was portrayed as being miserable and not fully complete because she was not married yet. Then when she married the prince, she was so happy and could finally escape her evil stepfamily. So that's all from us. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Basically, very clear explanation about new historicism. It's not about the story itself, right? It is actually a window for looking at something else in the story, and the story reflects the history. The way history reflects story, right? For example, in the Merchant of Venice, written by Shakespeare. We don't look at the story, but we look at Shakespeare. Is he someone who is a racist or not? Right? Or the social structure of those era during Shakespeare's time. That is new historicism. Thank you very much. I think we have the last pair, right? I think